What's going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully, all of you enjoyed the draft festivities over the last few days. A little return to normal for all of us. We were able to kind of take our mind off everything going on around us in the world and just focused on football. And I'll tell you what, it felt really, really good. So, for this episode, we're going to dive into which teams I felt had some of the best drafts, the winners of this past draft, not individual players. Those episodes will be coming soon, but we're going to talk about which teams were winners this weekend. Want to remind you real quick before we jump into all the information. Number one, you can head over to thefantasyheadliners.com and pre-order our draft guide for the 2020 fantasy football season. We're really excited jumping into all of that right now. It's going to be really, really good. So if you're looking for a draft guide, you know where to get one. And number two, also, if you are able and willing right now, we've been setting some supporter goals over on Patreon, so you can go down to the link below, head over to Patreon and help support us that way. Lots of different tiers over there, a ton of exclusive content. We're going to have Zoom calls this off season. We have a tier where we guarantee all of your questions will be answered. We have exclusive content, podcasts, articles, videos, lots of different things. So head over to Patreon and check that out as well. But let's talk about my first team, my first winner for the draft this season, and it is the Miami Dolphins. Really loved what the Miami Dolphins did, and one of the reasons I like what Miami is doing is because of how close they are to winning. And it might not seem after what they did last year that they are that close, but heading into 2020, they have a real shot to contend, maybe not contend for a division, maybe get a little bit closer to that 8-8 mark, maybe play for a wild card spot. But in 2021, they have set themselves up for a lot of success. In 2019, they were 5-11. Their key needs heading into this draft: quarterback, offensive tackle. They needed to also get something on the defensive line, whether it be a tackle or an end, an edge rusher, and then at running back. And they did a really good job of getting a lot of those positions. Last year, offensive defense was not great. 27th in total offense, 30th in total defense. Obviously, their first pick was Tua, falling down to them. I really love this pick for them. I mean, if it wasn't for the hip injury, he would have been the number one overall pick. That's who the Dolphins have been really waiting for a year now. So they get their quarterback and they get him at 5 instead of having to wait or try to move up to 1 to get him. So that little bit of success they got at the end of last season didn't end up killing their draft hopes. So a good end to the season for them. Hopefully translates over a little bit. But not only that, they get Austin Jackson out of USC also in the first round, so they help on the offensive line there. And then they also go cornerback where they needed to. And then Robin Hunt out of Louisiana, an offensive guard, a guy they can put on the line as well. I love how 3 of their first 4 picks were major offensive additions that they needed to have. And then also they're sprinkling in some defense as well. Raekwon Davis out of Alabama, really like that pick in the second round too. Defensive tackle there. Really, really think that he is going to help stuff the run on defense. So he is a guy that I think can make a lot of contributions right away. So Miami, they did really well because they didn't have to go after the sexy pick. I know a lot of people were clamoring for that running back. They don't go running back, but they end up trading for Matt Breida anyway later on. So they get their running back without having to spend a draft pick on it. They kind of did. They spent a 5th round pick on a veteran that they've seen do it before. So really love what they did with this draft. They went with the positions that they absolutely needed to have, and they've made their team better. My next team, my next winner, the Dallas Cowboys. And who would have thought that old man Jerry Jones, when he tells his scouts, leave me alone, I'm going to draft, actually ended up doing very well in this draft. And the reason that they did well is really because of the way they had some players fall to them. So last season, underperformed 8-8, second in the NFC East. They have their new offensive coach now, Mike McCarthy, not offensive coach, but head coach, offensive-minded head coach, Mike McCarthy. The key needs heading into this: safety, wide receiver, cornerback, defensive tackle, defensive end. Their rankings last year: total offense, they were first; total defense, they were 9th. and they just went and made this team even stronger. Mike McCarthy has a ton of weapons on offense to work with now. CeeDee Lamb falling all the way down to them, never would have guessed it. There was some picks that caught us off guard. Henry Ruggs ended up coming off the board first for wide receivers. CeeDee Lamb falls into their lap. And when they first made the pick, I was like, man, I don't know why they needed to make this pick. I understand, but it seems to be a little much. But when you actually look at it, and I mentioned this on the live streams, Amari Cooper, he's got a giant deal, 5 years, $100 million, but there is no guaranteed money in that contract after 2021. I think that makes Amari Cooper a little expendable now. Maybe not for 2020. He could finish the year with the Cowboys, and then maybe next offseason they tried to move him, and a team knowing, hey, I might not need to give up a lot because they've got the weapon, so they can get rid of him, and then we can have him for a year and cut loose and move on. So I think it makes Amari Cooper tradable for the Dallas Cowboys in a year when maybe they want to move on, and then they have CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup there. So they've got a ton of offensive weapons. So CeeDee Lamb falling to them, now that I think about it and I see that information, I like this pick even more. I also love that Trayvon Diggs and Neville Gallimore both fell to them. Diggs was a first-round pick for me. I had a first-round grade on him. And Gallimore, I had a late first, early second-round pick as well. So he also fell all the way down to the third round. Now, I was probably a lot higher on Gallimore than a lot of other people. Probably a little bit too high. But the dude ended up toppling into the third round. And that is now 3 players in the first 3 picks for the Dallas Cowboys that they got absolutely incredible draft capital on. So that was an excellent, and that's why I feel like they are one of my winners, because of how well they did getting those guys. They worked on the defense a little bit as well, so they get their cornerback. They also get their center. Tyler out of Wisconsin is able to come in. He's able to become their new center there, so they've worked on that position. So they did everything that they needed to do. Really loved this draft for the Dallas Cowboys. Jerry Jones, give it up for Jerry Jones for a minute, people. Ladies and gentlemen, I mean, he knocked it out of the park here, so congrats to the Cowboys. Next on my list, the Denver Broncos. Really liked what the Denver Broncos did as well, because Drew Lock, they've already said it. He is our quarterback of the future. John Elway has missed significantly on quarterbacks in his tenure, except for signing Peyton Manning. So because of that, they need to get Drew Lock the weapons. If they feel that he is the future, he needs to have the pieces around him to win. And that's what they did. They get Jerry Jeudy, again, another wide receiver that ended up falling to them. How Jeudy fell again as well. It's just, it was a culmination of things. A lot of different things happened. Ruggs ended up being the first off the board. There were some defensive players as well. A lot of tackles ended up going early, and Jeudy falls all the way down. But then they double up on that, and they go KJ Hamler from Penn State in the second round. And I like the Hamler pick, because Hamler is going to be able to stretch the field really, really well. So now they have tons of weapons there for Drew Lock to succeed. Last season, they were 7-9, ended up finishing second out in the AFC West. But here's the thing. Key needs. Wide receiver. They hit those first picks in the first 2. Offensive tackle. They don't end up getting their offensive tackle, but they do at least get a center and an offensive guard. So they still worked on that offensive line, and then they got their defensive tackle as well. So, and then again, too, cornerback. So even they were able to go out there and get their cornerback too. So they did a lot of good things in the draft. They really hit the needs that they needed to. Their total offense last year was 28th. I expect that to climb. They have given Drew Lock everything that he needs, and Jeudy and Hamler were 2 really good picks right away. Hamler, here's the thing with Hamler too. A lot of people liked him. A lot of people didn't. To me, he was just a field stretcher, really. He wasn't a guy that was going to do a whole lot. But on this offense, he could potentially be a guy that, yeah, he's a little bit boomer bust, but he's going to stretch the field to make that defense a little bit longer for his teammates, and he's going to be open for Drew Lock every once in a while, because when you've got Cortland Sutton that's going to be running around, and Jerry Jeudy, you've got Noah Fant, Melvin Gordon. There's a lot of guys there to pay attention to. Hamler's gonna go in behind some defensive players and be open for some big TDs this year. So that's why I like that pick so much. So Denver also knocking it out of the park. Moving on to the Arizona Cardinals, my fourth team here, the Arizona Cardinals. Now, for a team that didn't pick in the second round and then didn't pick until the third, two in the fourth, sixth and seventh, not a whole lot of picks. It might be wondering, why are they a winner for you? They didn't have a whole lot of picks. Well, again, kind of the same reason I talked about Dallas. They had some guys fall to them. Number one, right away you see Isaiah Simmons. Isaiah Simmons, I wanted to go to Detroit so bad at 3 overall. They end up going with Okuda the way a lot of people thought they would, but Simmons is a playmaker. And the one thing that I said about Simmons pre-draft is everything that you can do with him, he reminds me of Tyrann Mathieu, because Matthew's a guy that can move around and do a lot of different things. He's a born leader. He's got that attitude, that swag. That's what Simmons can do as well. And for him to land in Arizona, a place where Mathieu used to roam, that to me right there is huge, because I think that they also see the same thing with Simmons. So Simmons is a guy, they needed a linebacker. Simmons is going to be able to play some linebacker, but he's going to be able to move around and do some other things too. If you've subscribed here and you're a part of Headliner Nation, you know how I feel about Simmons. So I have to give them an automatic win just for that pick right there. But then they get Josh Jones in the third round. One of the offensive tackles that a lot of people thought had an early second round grade that could potentially creep up into the first. They get him all the way into third. So another guy there that falls to them. And then a really sneaky pick at the end of the draft, Eno Benjamin out of Arizona State. They get him to back up Kenyon Drake. Don't forget, Kenyon Drake is on a 1-year deal. Eno Benjamin is a guy that a year from now could be a really sneaky player for a lot of different reasons. The guy he runs really hard. He has a great attitude. He's going to be a guy that's going to learn really, really quickly. When we went to the Combine, I focused in on Eno Benjamin. I was there during one of his interviews. I was able to get a little bit of a read on him. And one of the things that he said was that the thing that sets him apart from everybody else is his desire to learn and be better. He said that he wants to be a student of the game, and this is a guy that at Arizona State was a great student. He is a guy that graduated fairly quickly. He said that he was always taking anywhere between 15 and 18 hours. So he is a really smart kid that loves the classroom. He loves to learn. So he's going to take a lot of things in this year. He's going to sit there behind Kenyon Drake. He's going to get some work with Drake there. So, don't fool yourself. He's not just going to be out of nowhere. But then this is a guy that in a year from now, I don't think he's ever going to be a lead back, but he is a guy that can play that pass catching role for Cliff Kingsbury. So I really like that pick all the way in the 7th round. So another reason that I had to list them as a winner is because they Simmons, Jones, and then that Eno Benjamin pick there at the end. Also, though, 2 defensive tackles there in the 4th round. Both of these guys are run-stuffing defensive tackles. You see there, the total defense last year was 32nd. You could run all over the Arizona Cardinals. They get 2 defensive tackles in the middle of their defense to now slow things down. Now you've got Chandler Jones. You've got Isaiah Simmons as well. Guys that can rush. Chandler Jones, obviously, a guy that can rush in there and can do a lot of different things on defense. Isaiah Simmons is going to be able to move around a lot. So they really did a lot of good things with that run defense. That total defense is going to be a little bit better this year too. My final winner here. There was a lot of winners. Don't get me wrong. There was a lot of teams that drafted really well. As a Lions fan, I wasn't too upset with how the Lions drafted either, so I'm going to give them a little bit of credit after completely tearing them apart last year. But anyway, the Cleveland Browns did a really, really good job as well. They get Jedrick Wills to fall all the way to them at 10th overall. He was my top graded offensive lineman. He was my most pro-ready offensive lineman as well. He was the guy that I thought could step in right away, play offensive tackle, but he's also a guy too that could have potentially moved into guard because I thought maybe there was a trade coming. Didn't end up happening, but he's going to be just fine. Obviously, they brought in Conklin on the offensive line, so now they've upgraded the offensive line. A part that was bad for them last year. The offensive line was not a great asset for them. So now they get their offensive linemen. But not only do they get Jedrick Wills to fall to them, but also Grant Delpit in the 2nd round. He's got some things that are a knock on him, but this is a guy that plays with a high motor, high intensity. He is going to be a really good safety for them. Yes, He can be a little iffy on open field tackles, but he is a guy that absolutely had a first round grade. He probably dropped because of some of those tackling issues, but he's going to get better. He's going to learn. He is going to be a great safety for them. That was a huge pickup, getting him all the way in the second round. And then also, again, defensive tackle. They needed to work on that defensive line a little bit. They go there with Jordan Elliott. They also go with their linebacker as well. They needed to have that, and they get one too. I don't know why they took another tight end. That one kind of surprised me a lot. I don't know why they need to have so many tight ends on the roster, but they do. And they get their center too, and then another wide receiver, Donovan Peoples-Jones there. Nick Harris out of Washington is center. So Cleveland also did a really good job in reinforcing that offensive line, and then getting Grant Delpit for the secondary was huge for Cleveland to really take, hopefully, a step forward this year. Again, those are just like 5 of my top teams. There was a lot of teams that drafted really, really good this year. There was a lot of teams that did some good things, but those were really 5 that stuck out to me for a majority of reasons. So let me know in the comments below, who were your draft winners? What teams do you feel did the best this season? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget as well, if this is your first time joining us here for a video on the Fantasy Headliners, make sure you hit that subscribe button, become a part of Headliner Nation today. And then also give the video a thumbs up if you like the content. We always appreciate that. Over at thefantasyheadliners.com, you can get our draft guide on pre-order, $19.99. Last year, it was almost 500 pages of amazing content. Expect some of the same things this year as well. Dr. Ethan Turner, one of our guys here at the Fantasy Headliners, you can get his rookie injury index right now too. You can get that over at the Fantasy Headliners for $10. And then don't forget, if you can support on Patreon and join the exclusive Headliner Nation, click on that link below, and we're going to try and get to, I'm trying to get us to 500 Patreon subscribers by the start of the NFL season. That's my goal. That's my goal. So if you can help us reach that goal, we always appreciate that. So Headliner Nation, thanks so much for tuning into this video. We'll catch you on the next one. Have a great one.